I'm Angela, 35 female. I live in a modest two-bedroom condo that I worked incredibly hard to afford, nestled in a quiet part of the city. I've built a stable life for myself as a senior accountant, a job that suits my meticulous and straightforward nature. My life was calm, predictable, and entirely my own, until my mother, Brenda, lost her apartment and had nowhere else to go. The story I'm about to tell you is about how opening my home to her revealed a toxic family secret that had been draining her, and me, for years, and how I finally had to balance the books on a lifetime of emotional debt. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday. It was my mother, her voice thin and crackling with a distress she rarely showed. Her landlord was selling the building, and she had 60 days to vacate the small, rent-controlled apartment she'd lived in for nearly 2 decades. At 65, with only a meager pension and Social Security to her name, finding a new place in the city's brutal market was an impossible task. "I don't know what to do, Angela," she'd whispered, and my heart, as it always did when it came to her, broke. "Don't worry, Mom," I said, the words leaving my lips before I had a chance to think them through. "You can come and stay with me." The decision felt natural, inevitable even. I was her daughter. This is what daughters do. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing the spare bedroom, which had previously been my home office. I bought a new bed, fresh linens, and a small television, wanting her to feel comfortable and welcome, not like a burden. I imagined us having cozy evenings, sharing stories, perhaps healing some of the old fractures in our relationship that had formed over the years. My brother, Leo, called to commend me on my generosity. "You're a saint, Angie," he said, his voice smooth and confident as always. I'd offer, but with my business travel and the market being what it is, my place is just chaos right now. I'll send Mom some money to help her get settled. I remember feeling a prickle of annoyance at his easy excuse, but I pushed it down. Leo was the golden child, the successful real estate investor who lived in a sprawling downtown loft. His life was a whirlwind of deals, flights, and fancy dinners, a stark contrast to my quiet, ordered existence. Of course, he couldn't take her in. He was busy being successful. I was just stable. Brenda arrived with 2 suitcases and a box of sentimental trinkets. The first week was pleasant enough. She seemed grateful, complimenting my cooking and telling me how much she appreciated having a safe place to land. We fell into a routine. I'd go to work, come home, we'd have dinner, watch a bit of television, and then retire to our separate rooms. But slowly, things began to shift. The compliments became critiques. My cooking, once delicious, now needed more salt or less spice, or was too much like the bland food her own mother used to make. The way I organized my kitchen was inefficient. The temperature in the condo was always too hot or too cold. Each comment was a small paper cut, insignificant on its own but stinging when accumulated. I tried to be patient, reminding myself that she was going through a major life upheaval. She had lost her home, her independence. Her frustration had to go somewhere, and I was the closest target. I'd bite my tongue and nod, offering to adjust the thermostat or buy different groceries. I was determined to make this work, to be the good daughter. I reminded myself of the sacrifices she had made for us when we were growing up after our father left. She worked 2 jobs, always tired but always there. I owed her this. I owed her my patience. The most confusing part of her behavior was how she talked about Leo. To her, he was a paragon of success and familial duty. She would spend hours on the phone with him, her voice light and full of laughter. After these calls, she would often relay his grand achievements to me. "Leo just closed a massive deal on a commercial property," she'd announce while I was washing the dishes. "He's thinking of buying a vacation home. He's so smart with his money." The praise was always extravagant, and it always felt like it came with an unspoken comparison. Leo was out there conquering the world, while I was here, in my sensible condo, living my sensible life. I tried to share my own successes with her. One evening, I came home thrilled after receiving a promotion at work, a position I had been working towards for 3 years. It came with a significant pay raise and more responsibility. When I told her, she smiled faintly. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she said, before immediately changing the subject. "Leo sent me the most beautiful flowers today, just." Out of the blue, he's always so thoughtful. The moment deflated instantly. My achievement felt small and insignificant, overshadowed by a simple bouquet of flowers from my brother. It was then that the first seeds of real resentment began to take root. I was providing her with a roof over her head, food, and security. I was absorbing her daily criticisms and anxieties. Leo, on the other hand, made grand but empty gestures from a comfortable distance, and in her eyes, he was the model child. The dynamic was exhausting, and I started to feel less like a loving daughter and more like an unpaid, unappreciated caretaker. The open door I had so willingly offered was beginning to feel like a cage, and my heart, once open to healing, was slowly closing itself off to protect what little peace I had left. I had no idea that the situation was far more complicated and sinister than I could ever imagine. The small paper cuts were about to become a gaping wound. The financial strain of having my mother live with me started as a slow creep and quickly became a constant pressure. My grocery bills nearly doubled. The utility costs spiked. There were new medications she needed, small comforts she requested, and the general expenses that come with housing another adult. I never asked her to contribute. Her pension was barely enough to cover her personal expenses and phone bill. I took on the burden without complaint, adjusting my budget, cutting back on my own discretionary spending, and assuring myself it was a temporary situation. After all, what else was I to do? Brenda, however, seemed oblivious to the financial adjustments I was making. She'd mention a new brand of expensive coffee she liked or a particular type of organic produce she'd read about, and I would dutifully add it to the shopping list, wincing internally at the cost. Meanwhile, her praise for Leo's financial prowess became a near-daily refrain. "He was the one who truly understood money," she'd say. "He knew how to make it, how to grow it, how to use it." It was a bitter pill to swallow, hearing her laud my brother's supposed financial genius, while I was the one meticulously managing my accounts to keep us both afloat. The first time I saw her give money to Leo, I thought I must have misunderstood. I was passing by her room one evening when I overheard her on the phone. Her voice was low and conspiratorial. "Yes, I can send it tomorrow," she was saying. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart. Just focus on your work. No, Angela doesn't need to know. It's just a little something between us." I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding. A little something? Where was she getting money to send to her wealthy son? My mind raced. Maybe Leo was in a temporary tight spot and was too proud to ask me. It seemed unlikely given his lifestyle, but it was the only explanation I could conjure. A few days later, I saw her slip a thick envelope into her purse before heading out to the post office. She was humming, a cheerful little tune that grated on my nerves. The sight of that envelope filled me with a confusing mix of anger and hurt. I was eating cheaper cuts of meat and putting off buying new work shoes so she could have her preferred brand of tea, and she was mailing cash to my brother who, by all accounts, was richer than both of us combined. The dynamic felt deeply unfair, a betrayal of the sacrifices I was making. It happened again about a month later. This time, I noticed a withdrawal slip from her bank on the kitchen counter. It was for $500. It was a huge sum for someone on her limited income. I couldn't help but ask. "Mom, is everything okay?" I began, trying to keep my tone gentle. "I saw this withdrawal slip. That's a lot of money." She snatched the paper off the counter, her expression turning defensive. "It's my money, Angela. I can do what I like with it." "I know, of course," I stammered. "I was just worried. Is there something you need?" She turned away, her shoulders stiff. "It was a gift for Leo," she said curtly. "His birthday is coming up, and I wanted to give him something special. He's been so good to me." His birthday was 5 months away. The lie was so blatant, so poorly constructed, that it felt like a slap in the face. She didn't even care enough to make it believable. My frustration boiled over. A gift? "Mom, he doesn't need your money. I'm the one paying for everything here. That $500 could have covered our groceries for the entire month." Her face hardened. "Leo appreciates what I do for him. He doesn't scrutinize my every move. He understands the gesture." The implication was clear. I was ungrateful and controlling, while he was appreciative and understanding. She was twisting the reality of the situation, painting me as the villain for questioning her financial decisions, while I was the one single-handedly supporting her. I retreated to my room, my head spinning with a toxic cocktail of emotions: anger, betrayal, and a profound sense of foolishness. I felt like a pawn in a game I didn't understand. I was being used. My home, my money, my emotional energy, it was all being consumed to maintain this bizarre, one-sided family dynamic where the struggling child supported the parent, so the parent could funnel money to the wealthy one. I started paying closer attention after that. I noticed the secretive phone calls always happened when she thought I was busy or out of earshot. I saw the discreet trips to the bank, the carefully sealed envelopes. It wasn't just a one-time gift, it was a regular occurrence. I confided in my best friend, Sarah, over coffee one weekend. I laid out the whole frustrating story, from the constant criticism to the secret cash transfers. Sarah, a paralegal with a no-nonsense attitude, listened patiently, her expression growing more concerned with every word. "Angela, this isn't right," she said finally, her voice firm. "This isn't just about her being ungrateful. Something else is going on here. Why would a mother on a fixed income be secretly sending hundreds of dollars a month to her son who is supposedly a millionaire? It makes no sense." "She says they're gifts," I said weakly. "She says he's so good to her." "Good to her how?" Sarah pressed. "By calling her and sending flowers while you do all the actual work. That's not being good to her, that's managing her from a distance. There's a piece of this puzzle you're missing." Sarah's words echoed in my mind for days. A missing piece. She was right, the logic wasn't there. My mother wasn't a fool, she was frugal and careful with money her entire life. This behavior was completely out of character. The narrative she was spinning, that these were simply gifts for her wonderful, deserving son, was flimsy and full of holes. The golden child was getting more than just praise, he was getting cash. And I, the responsible, dutiful daughter, was getting nothing but an empty wallet and a heavy heart. The feeling of being used was now solidifying into a cold, hard certainty. I just didn't know the reason why. The breaking point, the moment that shifted my frustration into a determined search for answers, happened on a rainy Saturday afternoon about 3 months into my mother's stay. I was doing a deep clean of the condo, a task I often undertook when I felt stressed and needed to feel in control of something. My mother had gone out for her weekly walk, a short trip to the nearby park that she rarely missed, rain or shine. I was clearing out the magazine rack in the living room, a cluttered collection of old periodicals and junk mail, when a thick, business-sized envelope fell out from between the pages of a gardening magazine. It was from her bank, and it had been opened. Normally, I would have just placed it on her nightstand without a second thought. My respect for her privacy, despite my growing suspicions, was deeply ingrained. But something about the weight of it and the fact that it was hidden made me pause. My conversation with Sarah replayed in my head. "There's a piece of this puzzle you're missing." My curiosity warred with my conscience. I stood there for a full minute, the envelope feeling heavy in my hand. What if the answer was right here? What if this was the missing piece? Taking a deep breath, I gave in to the impulse. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out the folded papers inside. It was her bank statement for the previous month. As an accountant, I can read financial documents the way most people read a novel. My eyes scanned the columns of dates, descriptions, and amounts, and my brain immediately started processing the data. I saw her small pension deposit at the beginning of the month. I saw a few minor debits for her pharmacy and phone bill. And then I saw them, a series of 5 separate cash withdrawals, each for exactly $250, made on different days from an ATM near my brother's downtown office. The total came to $1,250. It was more than her entire pension check. How was that even possible? Her balance should have been deep in the negative. But it was. As my eyes moved down the page, I found the corresponding deposits. There were several of them listed as e-transfer from an account I didn't recognize. The transfers were just enough to cover the withdrawals with a little left over. It was a bizarre pattern of money coming in and immediately going out in cash. It wasn't a gift. This was something else entirely. This was a structured, deliberate flow of funds. It was a system. My blood ran cold. Where was this e-transfer money coming from, and why was she pulling it out in cash near Leo's office? I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. This was more than just a mother spoiling her favorite child. This was methodical. It was hidden, and it was happening under my roof. I quickly put the statement back in the envelope and tucked it away where I found it, my mind racing a mile a minute. The front door clicked open a few minutes later, and my mother walked in, shaking the rain from her coat. She smiled at me, a perfectly normal, pleasant smile. "Nasty weather out there," she commented, oblivious to the storm that was brewing inside me. I just nodded, unable to trust my voice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the numbers from the bank statement burned into my memory. The e-transfers were the key. I had to know where that money was originating. The secrecy, the cash withdrawals, the location, it all pointed to Leo. But why? If he needed money, why wouldn't he just ask me? Or use his own credit? Why this convoluted system involving our mother's bank account? It felt like money laundering, a thought so absurd and out of place in my quiet life that I almost laughed. But the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. The next day, I knew I had to see more. I had to understand the whole picture. My mother kept a small, locked metal box in her closet where she stored what she called her important papers. She'd had it for as long as I could remember. It held birth certificates, old insurance policies, and, I suspected, more bank statements. Getting into it felt like a monumental violation of trust, but my own trust had already been eroded to almost nothing. I felt I was owed the truth. I waited until she was settled in the living room watching her favorite game show, the volume turned up loud. My heart hammered against my ribs as I went into her room. The box was on the top shelf of her closet, just as I expected. I had no idea how to open it without a key. I carried it to my room, my mind racing. I was about to search for a screwdriver to try and pry it open when I noticed a small, luggage-sized key on her dresser, tucked behind a framed photo of Leo and me as children. It looked like it could be the one. With a surge of adrenaline, I tried it. The lock clicked open. I lifted the lid, my breath catching in my throat. Inside, nestled among old photos and documents, was a thick stack of bank statements going back almost a year. A secret, hidden in plain sight, was finally within my grasp. I took the stack, closed and locked the box, put it back in her closet, and returned the key to its hiding spot. Then I went to my room, closed the door, and began to read. I spread the bank statements across my bed, the thin papers fanning out like evidence at a crime scene. I organized them by date, creating a timeline that spanned the last 12 months. My accountant brain took over, pushing aside the emotional turmoil and focusing on the patterns, the numbers, the cold, hard data. I created a simple spreadsheet on my laptop, logging every suspicious transaction, the mysterious e-transfers in, the methodical cash withdrawals out. The story they told was chillingly consistent. Every month, like clockwork, a series of electronic transfers would appear in my mother's account from the same source. The amounts varied slightly, but they always totaled between $2,000 and $2,500. Shortly after the deposits landed, a series of cash withdrawals would begin, always from ATMs in the financial district where Leo's office was located. The withdrawals would continue until the deposited amount was fully depleted, leaving only her small pension to cover her own expenses. This had been going on long before she moved in with me. It explained how her savings had been wiped out, forcing her to lose her apartment. She hadn't been a victim of a rising rental market. She had been systematically drained. The source of the e-transfers was the most pressing question. The transaction description was just a generic code, but there was an account holder name attached to it. L. Vance. My brother's name was Leo Vance. The connection was undeniable, but it still didn't make sense. Why was Leo depositing money into her account only for her to withdraw it as cash and give it back to him? It seemed like an incredibly inefficient and risky way to move money around. It felt like he was using her as a financial intermediary, a smurf to launder funds, but that seemed too extreme. Leo was arrogant and selfish, but I never thought of him as a serious criminal. My next step was to figure out who was getting the cash. While I suspected it was Leo, I had no definitive proof. I thought back to the secretive phone calls. My mother always seemed anxious during and after them. This wasn't the behavior of a doting mother giving her son a gift. This was the behavior of someone under duress. The word Sarah had used, blackmail, echoed in my mind. It seemed far-fetched, but the evidence was beginning to align with that ugly possibility. Could my own brother be extorting our mother? The idea was so monstrous, it made me feel nauseous. To find out more, I knew I had to look into Leo's life, beyond the perfect facade he presented to the world. I started with a simple online search. His company, Vance Properties, had a sleek website filled with images of luxury cond. And glowing testimonials. He was presented as a young, dynamic mogul in the real estate world. Social media profiles painted a similar picture. Photos of him at exclusive parties, on lavish vacations, driving a sports car that must have cost more than my entire condo. It was a carefully curated image of immense success. But as I dug deeper, I started to find cracks in the veneer. I searched public records, a skill my paralegal friend Sarah had taught me. I looked for property records, business licenses, and any court filings associated with his name or his company. It didn't take long to find something. I discovered a series of liens filed against one of his development properties for unpaid contractors. Then I found another and another. He owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to electricians, plumbers, and construction crews. These were not the signs of a thriving business. The real breakthrough came when I searched for civil court cases. I found a lawsuit filed against him 6 months ago by a private lender. According to the court documents, Leo had taken out a high-interest, short-term loan for nearly $500,000, using a future development as collateral. He had defaulted on the payments. The lender was described in the filing as a private investment group, but a quick search of the company name led me to articles about predatory lending and its ties to organized crime. These were not people you wanted to owe money to. They were loan sharks, plain and simple. Suddenly, everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Leo wasn't successful, he was drowning in debt. The fancy car, the expensive loft, the lavish lifestyle, it was all a house of cards, funded by debt he couldn't repay. He wasn't blackmailing our mother for extra spending money. He was desperate. He was likely being threatened by these dangerous lenders, and he was using our mother to make his payments. The cash withdrawals were his way of paying them off the books, leaving no direct paper trail from him to them. He was using our elderly mother's bank account as a shield, a cutout to hide his illicit transactions. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I felt a wave of rage so intense it made me dizzy. My brother, the golden child, had not only squandered his own opportunities, but had dragged our mother into his dangerous, sordid mess. He had manipulated her, bled her dry, and caused her to lose her home. And he had let me believe she was just a difficult, ungrateful woman who favored him. He let me take on the financial and emotional burden of her care, while he was the one responsible for her predicament. The criticism I had endured, the feeling of being unappreciated, it was all a smokescreen to hide his monumental failure and deceit. I sat there for a long time, the bank statement spread before me, the court documents glowing on my laptop screen. The image of my brother, the charming, successful entrepreneur, shattered into a million pieces. In its place was the image of a desperate, selfish man who would sacrifice his own family to save himself. My sorrow for my mother was immense, but my anger at Leo was a cold, hard thing. He had built his life on a foundation of lies, and he had used our mother's love and my sense of duty as his primary building materials. The investigation was over. I had unraveled his deceit. Now, it was time to plan the demolition. The anger that had been simmering inside me for weeks now had a clear focus. It was no longer a vague resentment towards my mother or a general frustration with my brother. It was a cold, precise fury directed squarely at Leo. For days, I walked around in a haze of this newfound clarity. I watched my mother, and for the first time, I didn't see a critic or an ungrateful guest. I saw a victim. I saw the subtle fear in her eyes when her phone buzzed with a text from Leo. I saw the weariness in her shoulders after a trip to the bank. She wasn't just sending him gifts. She was paying a ransom to protect the son she adored, likely from a threat he had manufactured to manipulate her. My first instinct was to confront them both immediately, to storm into the living room and lay the bank statements on the coffee table. But I quickly realized that a purely emotional outburst would accomplish nothing. Leo would deny everything, and my mother would likely side with him, caught between loyalty and fear. He would paint me as the snooping, jealous sister, and I would be the one to look unhinged. No, if I was going to do this, I had to do it my way, methodically, logically, and with undeniable proof. As an accountant, I knew that the most powerful statements are the ones backed by irrefutable evidence. This situation required a quiet audit, not a loud argument. I called Sarah and told her everything I had found, the bank statements, the liens, the lawsuit from the loan sharks. She was silent on the other end of the line for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was grim. "Angela, this is worse than I thought. These are not people to be trifled with. Your brother is in way over his head, and he's put your mother in the middle of it." "I know," I said, my voice tight, "but I can't let him get away with it. He destroyed her financial security and has been using me to clean up his mess. I have to expose him." Together, Sarah and I formulated a plan. It wasn't about revenge in the sense of causing him pain for its own sake. It was about severing his financial hold on our mother, forcing him to face the consequences of his actions, and ensuring he could never manipulate us again. It was about a final, unavoidable reckoning. The plan had 3 phases. Phase 1 was about securing the evidence. I made high-quality scans of every single bank statement, every court filing, every lien document. I saved them to a password-protected folder on a thumb drive, which I then gave to Sarah for safekeeping. I also created a summary spreadsheet that detailed the flow of money, dates of deposits from Leo, dates and locations of cash withdrawals by Brenda, and the corresponding threats or requests I could glean from overhearing their phone calls. I started discreetly recording their conversations on my phone whenever I heard them start one of their hushed, anxious talks. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but his tone, demanding and urgent, and hers, frightened and placating, was unmistakable. Phase 2 was about creating leverage. Sarah's legal knowledge was invaluable here. She explained that what Leo was doing was a form of elder financial abuse, a serious crime. The structured cash withdrawals could also attract the attention of financial regulators for potential money laundering. While we had no intention of sending my brother to jail, the resulting scandal would hurt my mother more than anyone. The threat of it was a powerful tool. Sarah helped me draft a formal letter, not for mailing, but for presenting. It calmly and professionally laid out the facts, citing account numbers, transaction dates, and the relevant legal statutes he was violating. It was a document that left no room for interpretation or denial. Phase 3 was setting the stage. A simple confrontation wasn't enough. It needed to be an event he couldn't escape or deflect. I decided on a family dinner. I told my mother I wanted to do something nice for her and Leo, to thank him for being so supportive while she was staying with me. The bitter irony of the words almost choked me, but I managed to say them with a smile. My mother was delighted. The idea of a happy family meal, a return to normalcy, was incredibly appealing to her. She called Leo immediately, and he, likely suspecting nothing, agreed. He probably thought it was an opportunity to further cement his status as the perfect son in front of his dutiful, boring sister. The dinner was set for the following Sunday. The week leading up to the dinner was one of the most stressful of my life. I had to maintain a facade of normalcy, engaging in pleasant small talk with my mother while knowing the devastating truth I was about to reveal. Every time she praised Leo, I felt a fresh wave of anger, but I channeled it into my preparations. I cooked and cleaned, creating the perfect domestic setting for the implosion I was about to trigger. I felt like I was preparing for a corporate audit, laying out my files and rehearsing my presentation. I had my evidence, my summary, and the letter Sarah had helped me draft. The night before the dinner, Sarah came over to help me do a final run-through. We sat at my dining table, the same one where the confrontation would happen. "Are you ready for this?" she asked gently. "His reaction could be explosive, and your mom, this is going to shatter her image of him." I took a deep breath. "I know, but she needs to be free of him, and this is the only way. He's a parasite, and I'm done letting him feed on this family. He won't see this coming. He's always underestimated me. He thinks I'm just the quiet, sensible accountant. He's about to find out how quickly a sensible accountant can run the numbers on his entire life." My voice was steady, my resolve absolute. The final reckoning was prepared, and the books were about to be balanced. Sunday arrived with a heavy, overcast sky that perfectly matched my mood. I spent the day cooking a roast chicken, the familiar motions of preparing a meal helping to calm my nerves. My mother was in high spirits, bustling around the condo, changing into a nice dress, and chattering excitedly about how wonderful it was to have both her children together for dinner. Her joy was a knife in my gut. She had no idea that the family she was so desperate to hold together was a complete fiction, and that I was about to burn it to the ground. Leo arrived precisely at 6, all charm and expensive cologne. He handed me a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill and gave our moth a theatrical hug. "Brenda, you look beautiful," he boomed, kissing her on the cheek. "Angie, this place looks great. See, I told you she'd take good care of you." He settled at the table as if he were a king holding court in a peasant's hut. Throughout the meal, he dominated the conversation, regaling us with exaggerated stories of his business triumphs. He talked about a new high-rise project he was scoping out and the 7-figure deal he had just closed. It was all a performance, and I felt a cold detachment as I listened to his lies, knowing the truth of his financial ruin. My mother hung on his every word, her face glowing with pride. "Oh, Leo, you're just so brilliant," she'd say. "I always knew you'd be a huge success." I played my part, nodding and smiling, asking just enough questions to keep his ego inflated. "It must be so stressful managing all that," I'd say, my voice dripping with false sincerity. "It's a lot of pressure," he'd agree, puffing out his chest. "But that's what it takes to get to the top." The hypocrisy was suffocating. After we finished eating, as my mother was about to get up to clear the plates, I held up a hand. "Wait, Mom, sit down, there's something I need to discuss with both of you." My tone shifted, losing its warmth, and the change was palpable. Leo's smile faltered slightly. My mother looked at me, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. I took a deep breath and reached for the file folder I had placed on the sideboard. I laid it on the center of the table. "What's this, Angie?" Leo asked, trying to sound nonchalant but failing. "Tax stuff. If you need help, you should have just asked." "No, it's not my taxes," I said calmly, opening the folder. "It's about Mom's finances and yours." I pulled out the first document, a copy of Brenda's bank statement with the e-transfers from L. Vance highlighted in yellow and the corresponding cash withdrawals highlighted in pink. I placed it in front of my mother. "Mom, I know about the money," I said gently. "I know about the thousands of dollars Leo has been funneling through your account." Brenda gasped, her face draining of all color. She looked from the paper to Leo, her eyes wide with panic. Leo's charming facade vanished, replaced by a dark, thunderous expression. "What have you been doing, Angela? Snooping through her private things? That's pathetic, even for you." "It's called doing my due diligence when I see my mother, who I am supporting entirely, suddenly losing her home because her savings have been mysteriously drained," I shot back, my voice like ice. I then laid out the next set of documents, copies of the property liens. "You told us you were closing big deals, Leo, but public records show you owe hundreds off thousands to your contractors." His face was now a mask of fury. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, I think I do," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I saved the final exhibit for last. I placed the court filing from the predatory lenders directly in front of him. The name of the plaintiff was in bold letters at the top of the page. I know about the loan, Leo. I know you're in debt to very dangerous people, and I know you've been using our mother to make off-the-books cash payments to them. You didn't just let her lose her home, you caused it. You bled her dry to save your own skin. A heavy silence fell over the table. My mother was openly weeping now, her hands covering her mouth as she stared at her son, the awful truth finally dawning on her. Leo looked trapped, his arrogance evaporating into pure, cornered rage. "You're trying to ruin me," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "You've always been jealous of me." "Jealous?" I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Jealous of what? Your mountain of debt? Your terrified mother? Your life built on lies?" "You haven't just lied to us, Leo. You've committed elder financial abuse. You've used her as an accessory to what could be considered money laundering." I slid the final document across the table, the letter Sarah had helped me draft. "This outlines everything you've done, complete with account numbers, dates, and the specific laws you've broken. This is my one and only offer. You will cease all contact with Mom regarding money, effective immediately. You will sign a document, which my friend who is a paralegal has already prepared, acknowledging your debt to her, the full amount you've taken over the last year, and a repayment plan will be established. If you refuse, a copy of this entire file goes to the district attorney and the IRS. Your choice." He stared at the letter, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. For a moment, I thought he might explode, might flip the table or scream. But instead, he just deflated. The fight went out of him, replaced by the hollow look of utter defeat. He couldn't deny it. The evidence was absolute. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw him not as my brilliant older brother, but as a weak, pathetic man. He had been so used to being underestimated, to being the center of my mother's world, that he never imagined his quiet, responsible sister was capable of methodically dismantling his entire life. The truth had been served, and it was a bitter, indigestible meal. The aftermath of that dinner was not a fiery explosion, but a quiet, somber collapse. Leo didn't argue or protest. He simply signed the acknowledgement of debt and the repayment agreement I put in front of him 2 days later, his movements stiff and his eyes avoiding mine. The agreement stipulated that he would pay back the full $28,500 he had funneled through our mother's account over the past year. The payments would be made directly to a new account I had set up for her, one that I would help her manage. He left my condo without another word, and the silence he left behind was profound. My mother was the real casualty. For days, she was a ghost in my home, barely speaking, her face a constant mask of grief and shame. The image of her perfect son, the golden child she had worshipped and protected, had been irrevocably shattered. She wasn't just mourning the loss of her illusion, she was grappling with the reality of his betrayal and her own role in enabling it. We had several long, difficult conversations in the weeks that followed. She cried a lot. She apologized for her criticism, for her blindness, for not seeing how much pressure I was under while she was so focused on Leo's manufactured crises. "I thought I was protecting him," she confessed one evening, her voice thick with tears. "He told me these men were threatening him, that his business was just in a temporary downturn. He swore he'd pay it all back. I was so scared for him." "He manipulated your love for him, Mom," I said gently, sitting beside her on the sofa. "That's not your fault, it's his." It was a long road, but slowly she began to heal. Without the constant stress of Leo's demands, a sense of peace began to settle over her. The anxious, critical woman who had first moved in started to fade, replaced by a softer, more genuine version of my mother. Our relationship, once strained and fractured, began to mend in the quiet space his absence created. We started talking more, not about Leo, but about everything else. We found a new, more honest rhythm. Leo, true to form, defaulted on his repayment plan after only 2 months. The small payments stopped coming. When I reached out via formal email, I received a one-line response. "I've filed for bankruptcy. The business is gone, there's nothing left." He had taken the coward's way out, wiping his slate clean through legal maneuvering rather than honoring his debt. A part of me was furious, but another, larger part just felt tired. I had never expected to see that money again. The goal was never financial restitution, it was about liberation. In that, I had succeeded. He had lost his power over us. His bankruptcy was just the final, pathetic postscript to his story of lies. With the drama finally over, I could focus on the future. My mother and I decided that her living with me permanently was the best solution. The promotion at work gave me the financial stability to support us both comfortably. We converted the spare room into a true bedroom for her, a space that was entirely her own. She started volunteering at the local library, making new friends, and building a life independent of her children's shadows. Seeing her laugh genuinely, free from the weight of Leo's secrets, was a better reward than any amount of money. As for me, the experience changed me profoundly. I had always seen my meticulous, detail-oriented nature as a simple professional skill, something I applied to spreadsheets and financial reports. But in this crisis, I learned it was my superpower. It was my ability to see through the noise, to find the facts, and to build an unshakable case that had set us free. I had always lived in Leo's shadow, the sensible and boring one. I realized now that my stability wasn't boring, it was strength. My sensibility wasn't a weakness, it was my foundation. I closed the books on that chapter of my life. The final balance sheet was clear. On the debit side, there was a broken relationship with my brother and the painful loss of family illusions. But on the credit side, the assets were far greater. A renewed, honest relationship with my mother, the freedom from a toxic dynamic that had plagued us for years, and a newfound respect for my own strength and capabilities. I had taken a burden into my home, discovered a devastating betrayal, and faced it head-on. In the end, I hadn't just balanced the books, I had rebuilt the entire company. And for the first time, my life felt like a truly profitable enterprise.